Oh, hello, and this is the second part of the Living by Faith we talk, looking at the crossing of the Red Sea. So we looked at the end of chapter 13 and considered why God put them in this position. And now we're going to chapter 14 where the actual crossing occurs. And first of all, we get more what God's thinking is. Let's read verses 1 to 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the people of Israel, they're wandering in the land, the wilderness has shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. So we talked last time about how one of the things that God was doing is want his people to exercise faith, to trust him. Here we see another reason, one we don't often talk about. God was seeking to gain glory for himself before the Egyptians. It says that the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. Now that's important for us when we look at what's happening in the world today. Because we see all sorts of things and we can think, why God? What are you letting this happen for? Why don't you just intervene, just put a stop to it? Whether we're talking about things like the war in the Ukraine, or all the transgender stuff, which our governments and education authorities and so on seem to want to just shove down children's throats. And we think, why don't you do something, God? Well, God may seem to be slower than we would like him to be. But God is not idle. God is not ignorant of what's going on. And part of what it's going to do, part of the ultimate result, will be that all those people, all those forces which are in rebellion against God, will eventually come to a point where they realize that he is the Lord. Now let's go on to verses 5 to 9. So we've had part of what God's thinking. Now we're going to get what the Egyptians were thinking. It says, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed towards the people, and they said, "What's this we've done? We've let the Israelites go from serving us." So he made ready his chariot, took his army with him, and took 600 chosen chariots, and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel, while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them. All Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army overtook them encamped at the sea by Pi-hahiroth in front of Baal-zephon. So, what we just see, when they were eventually the Israelites escaped, there was the plague of the death of the firstborn. The Egyptians were filled with fear. They just wanted to just go. Their thinking was just completely consumed by the moment. They just wanted rid of them. They've got to stop this disaster, this plague which is coming on the land. Then they've gone, the plague has stopped, and then they start to think, oh, we've lost our slaves. By the way, as an aside, a lot of the times there are some people you would think that slavery is purely a feature of Britain and America. And it's absolute garbage. Slavery has been part of virtually every civilization. That's just an aside. But anyway, I think we've lost our slaves. So that's why they then go chasing after them. We want to get our workers back. So we see what the Egyptians think. Now what are the Israelites thinking? Let's read verses 10 to 14. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you brought us out here to die in the wilderness? What have you done bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You have only to be silent. So, what have we got here? We've got the Israelites. They're blaming Moses. I've said this once, at least probably several times, many times before, and I'll say it many times again. There are two groups of people, those who complain to God and those who complain to men. Sometimes complain to men about God. And here's the Israelites complaining to Moses. And they had no trust in the Lord. And they talked a lot of nonsense. Remember that when they were under slavery, under the oppression, they cried out to God because of the cruel oppression they were under. Now they've been freed from that oppression, they then start having a rose-tinted view of what was things. I mean, they talk a lot of nonsense here. There's more later on in Exodus and in Numbers, they talk even more nonsense. And they didn't want to trust God. They just wanted to be free of the oppression. They found out that the road involves sort of challenges, obstacles, difficulties. We need to trust God. It's the only way. The only lifestyle that God approves of is one which involves trust in him. So it would have been better for us to stay in Egypt, which was nonsense. And then Moses says to them, fear not, stand firm, see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. Our God is active. He acts on our behalf. It's not just trusting in a static God. It's trusting in an active God. Let me just read verse 15, then we'll stop. I've said something about verse 15 as well. The Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. You see, we can easily be paralysed or guided by fear. It is almost always a mistake to be guided by fear, to make decisions out of fear. Now, we need a bit of common sense here. If you're about to think of crossing the road and there's a double-decker bus speeding along that road, don't cross until the bus has gone. Going across that point would not be faith, it would be stupidity. But God says to people, go forward. And see, what have the people done? And what were they going to do when they crossed the Red Sea? They escaped from situations they could not escape themselves. But they didn't put the trust in God. They kind of thought Moses was leading them out. They didn't see who the real power was that was leading them out, so they didn't put the trust in God. And we might put our faith in a particular preacher or evangelist or prophet or whatever. We need the foundation, the root, the heart of our faith must be in God. Otherwise, we'll end up in trouble. So, don't end up in trouble. Goodbye.